Hey everyone, welcome back to Tic Tac Taiko. It's a new year. I've got a new mini-series and I'm calling it the Naname Primer. This is going to be a 3-part series which I talk about the drum, the stance, and the striking all on Naname. And this mini-series is great if you're new to Naname and you'd like a little more instruction, or if you're self-taught and don't have a lot of access to instruction, or maybe you're interested in Naname but it's daunting, you don't know where to start. But it's also good for those of us who have experience with Naname and just would like to hear different perspectives. So in general, it's good for everyone. This week's video is on the drum, a little bit about the stand, and a little bit about the history. Before I forget to say it, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Why not start the new year off right? And I'm not going to get too much into the history, but a little bit of history for Naname is actually really valuable. Japan has had taiko for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Most of the drums were upright, beta, or horizontal, yokouchi, or portable, or all kinds of configurations, but not at a slant. Until Oedo Sukuroku Taiko back in 1959, a group in Tokyo, Japan, created this style. And Naname just means slanted or askew, which is exactly what the drum is, at a slant. As you can see, this style of playing is fun. It's fun to do, it's fun to watch. It's a very dynamic style of playing, and it leads to a lot of different visuals than you would get on all the other styles of taiko up until that point. Now we fast forward until 1968, when Grandmaster Seiichi Tanaka brings taiko from Japan to North America. And he brings with them the beta style, the Naname style, and the Gojinjo style of drumming. Gojinjo didn't really catch on. That's a whole other video, maybe someday in the future, but Naname and beta really do. And from there, North American taiko takes off. Beta and Naname become very common styles of playing in North America, which brings me to a theory I have. While I'm sure there's way more taiko players in Japan, actual numbers of people that play Naname, I think the percentage of those who play Naname in North America is much, much higher. And this is why. So taiko was around for hundreds and hundreds of years in Japan. Naname, this relatively new style, comes along, but most people aren't picking it up. It's like dance. Oh, that's a really cool new dance style, but we do tap or we do hip hop. I'm not going to incorporate that because that's not my style, but it's interesting. And that's what happened with Naname in Japan. It's slowly getting introduced. New players might pick it up, new groups might incorporate it, but a lot of taiko groups just don't, and that's fine. But then in North America, beta and Naname are introduced at the same time. No one knows what's new and old, they're all new. So I might learn beta or Naname or both. Equally at the same time, there's the same chance of that happening. The axis is relatively the same. So I could be wrong. This isn't a theory that anyone can prove. It just feels to me like Naname was something North America took to heart. It was one of the first 2 styles that you could learn, whereas in Japan, it was one of many styles that you could learn. And the last part of history is something I wasn't sure if I was going to put in or not, but I think it's an important thing to bring up. In 1999, Seido Kobayashi, one of the founders of Oedo Sukuroku Taiko, sent a couple of messages through Seiichi Tanaka to the North American taiko community. The gist of the messages was this: you are playing my music or our music, and you are not allowed to do so. Stop. If you want to play this style, you either have to learn it through Tanaka Sensei or through me or us directly. Otherwise, stop. I remember being around at the time, about 6 years into my taiko journey, and I remember people being upset, people being confused, people being frustrated. You weren't sure what exactly you weren't allowed to do. Was it the stand? Was it the style? Was it the song? The response from North American taiko was generally one of 3 things. Either, I don't recognize his authority, I don't think he has any way to punish us for playing, or I don't care, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And because of this, Seido Kobayashi eventually sort of dropped his complaint. Don't know that anything official was ever done, but nothing came of it. Still, it's kind of important context. It's been about 25 years. I don't know how he feels about it now, but these are the kind of things that's important to know. This is what happened in the past, and these were pretty major events. that made people feel one way or the other. And that's all the history I'm going to cover. There's a lot more I could talk about. There's individuals and there's timelines, and I'm not going to do it. I want to get on to the drum itself. If you are interested in more of the history, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. There's lots of stuff online. There's lots of people to talk to. When it comes to actually playing in Naname style, there are 3 factors which are either going to help or hinder your playing. The first one is minor, but it's worth mentioning, and that's the size of the drum. If you take your average Chudaiko or Nagado Daiko, if you don't know what those mean, don't worry, and you have it on beta, or you have it on yoko uchi, and you transfer it to Naname, probably not going to be too much of an issue. And a larger size is not necessarily better, but it's still going to be easy enough to play. However, when it's smaller, it can make it much more challenging to play your Naname technique. And there's a simple reason. If you think about beta, you're right in front of the drum. Everything is symmetrical. But Naname, you're asymmetrical. Your left hand has one type of technique. Your right hand has another type of technique. It's not natural, as if anything we do in Taiko is natural, but it's much more difficult. And now you're applying it to a much smaller surface. So while in general this is a minor factor, it can still have an effect, especially when the drum is smaller. The next factor is definitely not minor. It's probably the biggest factor in how you play Naname, and that's the angle of the stand. The stand is going to determine how you play Naname more than anything else. And this brings me to a question I like to ponder. You may not. If you think of beta as the drum being at 90 degrees and yoko uchi as a drum being at 0 degrees, at what point does the drum become Naname? Now, there are some people who play beta where the stand is actually tilted slightly towards them. And this helps not play at a flat angle. It makes it easier to have a nice, good sound. But there are some disadvantages too. I'm not going to get into that. That's maybe 5 to 10 degrees away from 90. Is that Naname? And then you have yoko uchi, but not really. If you take the drum off the stand that's horizontal, you put it on the ground and you tilt it just a little bit, now you have the yatai bayashi style, which is, 5 to 10 degrees off the ground. Is that Naname? Personally, I think it's not so much about the angle, even though technically the drum is askew or slanted once you tilt it a little bit in or a little bit down. But Naname generally is the style of playing, which is kind of behind the drum with the drum to the front and to one or either side of you. Now, I realize I'm getting a little bit off topic. This is kind of those intellectual exercises or those questions like, what is a sandwich? Is this a sandwich? Is that a sandwich? Some people hate those kinds of questions. I love them. And that's what this is. When is Naname Naname and when is it not? But going back to the original point about the angle, I'm not going to get into the strike because we're going to cover angles and how those affect strikes in the 3rd video in the series. But the angle of the drum is going to determine how easy it is for you to have a good strike and what stance you have to be in. If the drum is just tilted a little bit, you're going to have to be at a higher height. If it's not, if it's closer to the ground and tilted up a little bit, odds are you're going to have to be lower. Of course, if you're a taller or shorter person, you're already adjusted. But it's really important, especially when you're new to Naname, to realize the angle will affect how you play. And sometimes it's not about your technique. It's just you have to adjust, and you don't know how to adjust if you're new to Naname. The last factor is height. And this is not quite major or minor, maybe a little leaning towards major, but it will have an effect on how you play Naname. I say that the angle and the height are 2 independent variables, and they don't necessarily cancel each other out. Like you can have a really high slant on a low stand. I don't necessarily think that makes it easier, just like I don't think it makes it easier to have a low slant on a high stand. Both of those factors are independently going to make you adjust your technique. But you absolutely might find the right angle for you and the right height, and those I think will both make your taiko playing easier. Unfortunately, there's no way to really lower the height of a drum on a stand, but there are ways to raise it. Simplest thing is putting it up on a cart which has wheels or some system which just adds height. That's generally easier. Doesn't necessarily benefit those who are on the shorter side, but it does give you a way to change at least one of the variables in one direction. As a quick example of what I'm talking about, this drum, which you can mostly see, is the first Nagado I ever bought. And the slant stand that came with it puts the drum at a really low height. In fact, I can't get all of me and all of the drum in the shot. So you're getting the best part, which is me. If I play in my normal Naname stance, I'm too high. If I get into a lower stance, like I might have played with sounds like Taiko, I'm still too high. To play this drum, I have to get so low just to make sure that my arms have a nice angle of approach. And this is not comfortable. But in order to play the drum well, I have to modify myself beyond what is comfortable. So if I was to play this for performance or practice on it, I have to decide how much do I sacrifice physical body comfort versus strike mechanic and efficiency. That's a decision I have to make. But I at least have to know that there are options, and it's not just my technique sucks or I'm not playing it right. There's no way to play it right when there's such a mismatch between the player and the equipment. Now, to some of you, this is really obvious stuff. The size, the angle, and the height of the drum affect your technique. Duh. Like, it's not any different with betta, it's not any different with yoko uchi, it's not any different with otaiko. True. But Naname is one of those things where I see people getting frustrated because, hey, I play betta really well. And all of a sudden, all of those skills seem to go out the window. And it's important to, I think, just be kind to yourself and understand this is a very different style. It's not natural. It can translate from betta to Naname if you have a good instructor or you're able to figure it out. But a lot of people, they're struggling. The instructor doesn't necessarily know how to translate things well, or that person is stuck thinking in a certain way and it's not clicking. So just having an understanding of the variables and knowing that they will affect how you play, I think it's important. And that's why I made this video. We covered a lot of things in this first video. There's history, a little bit of context, the stand, the drum itself. It's a lot of overall information. Next time I'm going to talk about the stance, and that video after that is going to be talking about the strike. I would love to know your thoughts on this week's video, but also if you have things that you'd like me to talk about specifically when it comes to stance or striking in the future videos, let me know those as well. And until next time, keep on practicing and be well.